I was born in Greene County, Indiana, and in my junior year of high school, I decided to quit and join the United States Army because of the Korean War. During World War II, my dad was a Navy Seabee in the South Pacific, and of course all of us young kids at that time were very gung-ho. And Korea came along, I wanted to fight, and that was my war. So at 17, I quit high school and joined the United States Army and requested to be in the infantry. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to fight, and that's where I wanted to be. When I got out of the Army, I had finished, I got my general educational development. I took the test in the United States Army and got my equivalent of a high school diploma. I got out of the Army and I went to Transylvania University in Lexington, Kentucky, and I graduated with a BA degree in economics. While attending, while working for a company called Carlson Companies in Minneapolis, Minnesota, as president, I then had the opportunity to go to the Graduate School of Management at the University of Minnesota and graduated from that school. After that, I was very fortunate to meet the most wonderful woman in the world, my wife, Renee, and she has bared the burdens of the war ever since.
How do you feel about participating in the project to commemorate the Korean War veterans?
I think it's wonderful because the Korean War, as you may know, is known as the Forgotten War. Very little is known of it, and it's about time someone told the full story. Korean War, we lost nearly as many men during the Korean War in 3 years as they did in Vietnam in 10. So I'm glad you young people are doing this, and I'm very happy.
Why are you interested in participating in this project?
For the exact reasons I just stated. I want the world to know about the Korean War.
When did you enlist in the military?
I enlisted at the age of 17, right after my 17th birthday. I was afraid the war would be over if I waited any longer, and so I immediately quit high school and joined the Army.
What branch did you enlist into?
I enlisted in the branch that several Navy Seabees told me was one of the United States Army was one where you'd see plenty of fighting. They said there's no glory like some of the other branches. You're just going to be involved in some hard fighting. And the question was, do you want to serve your country or do you want to be a hero? So my goal was adventure and to serve the country.
What was your specialty?
I was when I went to Korea, they made me a machine gunner. Now I thought the guy that was with me, is 6'4", should be carrying the .30 caliber machine gun, but I was 5'8", and they gave it to me. He got the tripod. So that was my first job. And through casualties and other situations, I became the machine gun squad leader. After I was wounded, when I returned, after recovering, I returned to combat. I got the job I wanted. I wanted to be a rifleman, but with the experience I'd had as a machine gunner and going on patrols as a rifleman, I was able to become the rifle squad leader. And I was in charge of a 9-man rifle squad. We had a couple of BARs in that squad, but it was basically a rifle squad.
When did you rotate to Korea?
I went to Korea in May of 1952.
Where did you go through basic training?
I went through basic training at Fort Riley, Kansas with the 10th Mountain Division. There are no mountains there, but that's it.
Did you do any additional training?
Yes, we were fortunate. The first troops were Army troops that went to Korea, and they didn't have the money. After World War II, they were stripped down to 400 and some thousand men. They didn't have the money to train, and they were poorly trained. And basically, they were cannon fodder. I was fortunate to realize that, for the government to realize that this war is going to require trained people, and they gave us intensive training. All of our instructors, drill instructors, cadre, they were all World War II and combat veterans, World War II and Korean veterans. And so we had the best training possible. I had 16 weeks of basic infantry and 2 more weeks of I called it advanced, but we really had a lot more than that.
Any stories you would like to share about your time in Korea?
Well, there's a lot, but some of them I don't think you'd be interested in. But I think I had the good fortune of being told by the combat veterans who trained me, and by my dad, who, as I say, was a Navy Seabee during World War II in the South Pacific. They told me what to expect, both being there and afterwards. They said, remember, this is not training, these people shoot back. And they talked about the pain, the misery, the various things that I was going to experience. So I wasn't under any illusions. Even at 17, when I went to Korea, I knew what to expect, and so I wasn't surprised. I think I cried twice in Korea with my with the first casualties. It was, of all things, the first casualty I saw was a forward observer with the artillery who was up with us on the line. He would call in artillery for us. He and another forward observer, a shell blew up and just tore him to pieces. And I helped. I took his arm. They were putting him on a stretcher. And as I lifted his arm, the arm slid out of the sleeve. That was the first time. Forgive me. That was the first time. And then when I left Korea as a sergeant, I was leaving guys I was leading in combat, and it wasn't right. I felt we should have all stayed there and finished the job. And I think if you look at North Korea right now, you know we should have finished the job. The politicians and their cowardice prevented it. Now that's my opinion, and I truly believe it. We all should have stayed till it was finished, and we fought the war with one hand tied behind our back, as did the Air Force. The Chinese pilots could fly across the Yalu River and attack our troops and our planes, and then they could fly back safely across the Yalu River, and American planes weren't allowed to chase them back. So I have very strong feelings about that. And I should mention here too something. One of my friends just sent me a book, and I finished reading it, and it's called Korean Atrocities. And the world should know about this. America should know about this. This book is well documented. But I knew about Korean atrocities when I was there. But this book elaborates on things I didn't know. Thousands of Americans were sent to China, and I shouldn't say thousands, but hundreds were sent to China and to Russia, and they never returned. They were kept in slave labor camps in both places, and they were never returned. And the U.S. government knew about it and did nothing. In addition, in North Korea, they set up a hospital camp, and they used American prisoners and some British to experiment. They used chemical drugs on them. They amputated perfectly healthy people. They'd amputate arms and legs to check for their doctors to train them on combat fetal situations. American government people knew about this and did nothing. And it's been known and brought up again as late as 1991 that I'm aware of. And still the government has kissed the fanny of the Russians and the Chinese. The American people knew nothing about this, and they should. It should be brought up. Forgive me.
How did your family feel about you leaving?
It was interesting. It was the time of war, and my family, my dad had been there, my older brother was in the Army, and my mom made this statement. My mom made this statement. She said, "I don't worry about him, he's too mean to die."
What was your impression about the Korean War?
It was a war that needed to be fought. Maybe I know the guys with me felt that way. A good portion of my rifle squad, there was one kid in my rifle squad that was 16 years old. He was about 6'4", but he was 16 and lied about getting his. These guys were gung-ho and wanted to fight. We used to joke, we wanted to be the first ones over the wall at the Kremlin. Didn't want to stop at the Yalu River. We wanted to go all the way. We even then knew where the problems lay, and we wanted it to go all of the way. You weren't talking about people today. These were young guys that grew up differently, and that was the way we felt, and that's the way we acted.
Where in Korea were you stationed?
I wasn't stationed. We were situated. I landed at Incheon, and they sent me to Chuncheon, which was our division rear. And they sent me to there was a 31st Regiment of the 7th Infantry Division there, and I was assigned to Company C of 1st Battalion, 31st Infantry Regiment, and I'll never forget it. As soon as we got there, it was announced to us when I was assigned to the company, they said, "You've joined the 7th Infantry Division. It's known as the Bayonet Division. And when you leave here, you're going to know everything." And I felt we already did. He said, "When you leave here, you're going to know very well how to use the bayonet." And we trained with the scabbards off, 1-on-1, 1-on-2, and 2-on-3, and it wasn't pleasant. But we trained much more than we did in basic. So we felt we were prepared in that aspect. We were ready.
When did you rotate home from Korea?
I rotated home in May. I was 18 then. I rotated home in May of 1953.
Where were you stationed when you rotated home?
Well, it's interesting. They said they would give, as a rotating war veteran, the Army would give me 3 choices of bases. I chose Hawaii, the base in Hawaii, and Camp Atterbury, Indiana, and Fort Carson, Colorado. They sent me to Camp Rucker, Alabama. And at that time, Camp Rucker, and now it's a fort training helicopter pilots, but when I was there, I was sent there. It was an infantry camp, and it was a training base for recruits to train them to go to war. And the most rewarding job I've had in the Army, other than the combat situation, was training young men to go to war. The feeling was, with us, their lives depended on what kind of job we did. And it wasn't pleasant. Training was different in the Army then. I don't know what it's like now, but it was quite different. It was hard, it was brutal, but when you left there, you knew what the heck you were going to do, and you were capable of carrying out the job.
What was your opinion on the South Korean Army?
When I was in South Korea, the Army wasn't the greatest. Now they're one of the best armies, the best trained armies in the world. But when I was there, they weren't greatest. The greatest. You were, if they were backing you up, you were always a little bit leery. But before I left home, they had come around and were pretty well trained. Our problem in the Army was we've always been a social experiment, and because we couldn't get enough men to fight, our platoons they would integrate some South Korean soldiers. They weren't well trained, they couldn't speak English, and it degraded our ability to do the best job possible. When you have one man in your squad who can't speak English and is poorly trained, then you have to work on him while you're in combat. You have to get him prepared. And that's as hard. I've been in a battle where one of the nicest kids in the world, he was probably, I don't know his age, but he was probably 16 or 17, a South Korean soldier. And in the battle, he would hunch and fire, and I had to literally beat him to get him to stand up and fight. But he just had never been taught what it was all about, and that was some of the problems we had early on with the Koreans. They integrated into our Army.
Do you have any happy memories from the war?
I'm sorry?
Do you have any happy memories from the war?
Yeah, whenever we took a hill.
All right, I'm going to fix the camera very quickly.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at...
That should do it.
Okay.
Did you encounter any foreign troops?
Yes, the Turkish, a Turkish battalion relieved my battalion on line. And anytime that happens, certain officers and non-coms have to stay there and educate these people in these new positions on the situation out front, where the enemy are, where the most vulnerable positions are. And so I was with the Turkish company and a Turkish platoon, as a matter of fact, in a foxhole with two of them. And it was a very interesting experience. They were having lunch and they were down the foxhole, and it was like a large can in what it looked to me like just grease, and they had big chunks of bread. And so I shared this lunch, which was god-awful, and they dip it in there, and it tasted like grease to me, and they would eat it. But they had a great reputation, but I remember when I was up and I was showing some of the guys, there was a shell came in, and I never saw one for about 5 minutes. They just disappeared. But I don't blame them, but I guess by the time being up there, I was used to where many of those shells hid, so.
Explain a battle that impacted you, that you will never forget.
The impact on me, my wife knows.
Yeah. Explain a battle that impacted you.
I'm sorry?
Explain a battle that impacted you.
The biggest battle that impacted me was the battle in the Iron Triangle for Triangle Hill. And my company's mission was to take a hill called Jane Russell for obvious reasons. And there's Pike Peak and Jane Russell, and we call the other one Margaret O'Brien. And my job, my platoon and my company's job was to take Jane Russell, and we did. We took the hill, we jumped off just at daylight, maybe a little before daylight, and it wasn't until maybe 2 in the afternoon. And if you young people can understand something, when you're fighting up a mountain and you're looking up, it's not only really tough carrying heavy weapons and ammunition, but when they're shooting down on you and they're rolling hand grenades down on you, it's not pleasant, and it's a tough job. So people think, my God, it took you that long? Yeah, try fighting up a mountain when there are a few thousand Chinese shooting down at you. But we took the hill, and it was interesting. In that battle, as we were attacking, we had chartreuse panels on our back, and the reason we did that is because we had fighter jets coming in and starting way back behind us, firing on the hill, and this was so they'd know who we were, and they would fire on that hill and drop their bombs. And when we took the hill, it was very interesting. We were on that hill, and we looked down at these fighter jets. They would come over that hill, and they would go down and drop their napalm, and we would look down on these Chinese, North Koreans as it rolled over them. But we looked down on these jets, and it was always interesting to me. I always thought a plane would go like this. It was like these jets would go like this. But it was incredible, and God bless him. We loved him, and we depended on them. They were great for us.
When were you discharged from the military service?
I'm sorry?
When were you discharged from the military
I was
service?
discharged in May of 1953. And after that, I went on to college. But just before that, a little area called Dien Bien Phu in Indochina. There was a hot war over there with the French, and they took the division I was with in Camp Rucker. We had trained these recruits, so they turned it into a combat-ready outfit now, and they started training. They started preparing us to go to Indochina, and that's prior to my departure. My discharge, and they would have you at all hours of the day or night. They would have drills where within minutes you had to be on trucks with your equipment and shipping out. At that time, one of the greatest honors I had is in this new division. In every division, there's called an INR company, Intelligence and Reconnaissance, and you range out front of a division in combat. You're out there and you're getting a feel of where the enemy is, what they're trying to anticipate, what they're going to do. You're the eyes and ears for your division before things really happen. And my battalion, regimental, and division commander came to me at 19 and offered me the position of first sergeant of the Intelligence and Reconnaissance Company. And I have the papers. Nobody would believe this. At 19, my time and grade, I was now a sergeant first class, my time and grade was wavered, and it's in there approved for master sergeant. Now, they don't show it on my discharge, but the papers in there show I was approved at 19, which is unheard of. So,
How do you think your time in the military influenced your everyday life?
my wife knows about that.
Tremendously.
Knowing what to expect, I was told I was going to have hard times, and I did. I still have nightmares once in a while, not too often. She bears the brunt. She bears the brunt of it. But I think the toughest part was, I think for me, it made me tougher in training recruits, because I knew what needed to be done, and I knew it wasn't going to be pleasant for them, and I didn't want to make it pleasant. When I went to college, it was my toughest. I couldn't relate. I was sworn into a fraternity, but I probably shouldn't have been, because they made me the president of the pledge class, and I changed their whole situation around. Rather than beating on pledges, I said, that's no way that is no way for you to get to know your brother. And so I made that whole change, but I had a very tough time, and everybody thought I drank a lot. I didn't. I'd go down to the bar, and I'd sit there and I'd replay the war. And I'd do it by myself, and everybody thought, God, he drinks a lot. But my grades were fine, I did. But I didn't, my first 3 years, I just didn't relate well to the other students. And I guess I resented them, because I remember in Korea, where we were short combat men, and we had Koreans. I remember it, and you kids won't remember this, but the high school or the college kids having panty raids. And I thought if they wanted to run a few raids, come on over. We got plenty for them. So, but my junior year, I finally realized these young people are just being who they are. They're really good. I was fortunate to be in a fraternity with the nicest people in the world. Most of them were pre-ministerial students, as a matter of fact. They were the nicest people in the world, and God bless them, they tolerated me. But I think that was the toughest for me, relating to my peers in college, and they were all my age. I'd just been through a war, and I just couldn't relate to them. But in my junior year, I came around, and I accepted them for who they were, and realized that the problem was mine. It wasn't theirs, and. My senior year went very well, and I had a great time, and it turned out fine for me. A couple of funny situations in basic training. As you may know, I was very aggressive, and one of the things, every Friday night was GI night, where you had to scrub the barracks. And in the rifle racks, where you saw that M1 rifle, you're not supposed to put a patch in the bore of your rifle, because they say it'll make it sweat, and that's not good. Well, all the dust flying around, and I put a patch in the bore of my rifle. One of my peers, who was nothing other than a recruit like me, reported me to the platoon sergeant. So I had to go fill my full field pack full of sand, and I had to carry an M1 rifle, and I had to run 60 for an hour, run 60 steps at port arms with the rifle, and then walk 60 steps with the rifle above my head. That's 9.5 pounds. and with a pack full of sand on my back. So as I'm doing that for an hour, I kept thinking, now this guy I did this, it was a boxing. He was a Golden Glove champion. And I knew that I had one shot at him, but I was going to get him. And for a whole hour, I walked around there thinking, okay. And I walked out, got the sand out of my pack, I went in, put my rifle in the rack, and I walked up and I hit him as hard as I hit him, and he went down. But I knew he was going to get up. And then, but everybody stopped the fight. And now I'm back out on the battalion quadrangle with my pack full of sand, and I'm walking 60 and I'm running 60. So that was one for me. I was happy I did it, and I would do the same thing over again.
In your daily life, do you ever think about what happened in Korea?
Probably once a day. But understand something, I was 17, and the most significant thing in my life was the Army and that war. And I had the belief then that if you weren't any good to your country, you weren't any good. Now truly, right or wrong, that was my belief. I really felt that way. This country and communism, if you know anything truly about it, communism supposedly in all these communist countries has killed over 100 million people. That's 100 million, that's pretty well documented. I didn't know that then, but I knew it wasn't a good system. And so my attitude was, I was where I wanted to be, and everybody says, oh, when someone says, oh, that's so, no. I was where I wanted to be, and I was doing exactly what I wanted to do. So I have no regrets. I met some of the finest leadership the world could have ever asked for, and I met some of the most courageous people in the world. So I'm very happy, and it helped me be who I am today. She'll question that. But anyway, that was my feeling.
Have you been to Korea since you
I haven't.
visited?
Each year I think I'd like to go back, and I'd like to see it standing up. But I will tell you one thing. When some people say, you didn't win the war, I said, oh yeah? Look at North Korea, then look at South Korea. Who won the war? Look at South Korea. It's a thriving, incredible country. One of the top economies in the world, and they are incredible people, and one of the finest armies. We won the war. We did it. We had them on the other side of the 38th parallel, and that's where we wanted them to be. And if they'd have turned us loose, we would have gone all the way.
Do you have any message to those, including future generations who will listen to this interview?
Yes, I have a message. Stand up, and when the flag is played, stand up, because millions and millions of men have gone to war on behalf of this country. From prior to it being a country, hundreds and hundreds of men and women died for this country. And in the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, World War I, World War II, we fought, and America, remember this, America fought not for territory, we fought for what was right. And there's a saying, and you should remember this, the only territory America has ever asked for in a foreign country is the right to bury the people that died there.
What can you say about the legacy of the Korean War veterans?
The
Legacy.
The legacy, they fought a good war. They fought a war where no one half the time even knew that they were there. A lot of people I know said they didn't want to know about World War II. Just ended. They didn't want to know about the war. The people I knew said, it needs to be done, go do it, but don't tell us, don't put it on the news, don't tell us about it. And when we came home, unlike Vietnam, where they came home to antagonism, we came home to indifference, but that was fine with us. We knew when we were going over it was that way, and we had no illusions coming back. So it was what it was. I wouldn't have changed it. I'm happy I did what I did. I have no complaints about how the people felt about us or anything else. I'm glad I did it, and I'm glad America had the courage to stand up and do it. Just too bad the political leaders didn't have the courage to face it. Everything that's happening today is because they didn't let us finish the job. And we have a budding North Korea and Iran. And they're going to be they're a problem now, but they're going to be a bigger problem because we don't settle the job now.